Well, hi, everybody. It's the Week in the Tackle podcast. I'm Tom Rennie. Great to be with you for our second video episode. We've actually turned up in my home studio this week, as opposed to borrowing our friends at the office. Alongside me, spiritually, virtually, and emotionally in many ways, is MLS legend, Apple broadcaster, and essentially Benjamin Button. It's Brian Dunseth. How are you, mate? You all right?
I'm good. I'm a bit tired. I'm a bit exhausted. Had a couple days in Las Vegas with the family, as my boy Micah had his tournament down there. Jumped a plane. Couple of 3:30 in the morning wake up calls to get to early morning flights. Las Vegas. Sort your security out. What a disaster it is trying to get through that airport when I was like at Mandalay Bay. It's like a 10-minute drive, and it took me an hour to get to my plane's door. Boarding was already there. It's fine. I made it to LA. Fantastic experience. LAFC in that game, the win against New England Revolution alongside Max Bredos. Everything was good, my man. Exciting weekend for the Dunseth family. My wife had to drive home by herself with the boys. Ooh. There were some incidents. There was some traffic delays. There was some lifelong memories made. And yeah, we're all good, man. We're all good.
Lifelong memories that no one actually wanted. And those more like lifelong memories that will stick with you forever.
For sure.
As opposed to lifelong memories that you would have liked. I got loads of questions for you, and I want to do MLS update and Danny's flight diaries. And we're actually going to start with a USA topic this week. But I did want to mention this before we get going. I'm in my home studio this week, and of course, this is just for the people who watch on YouTube, which you can do if you're listening to the program. Have you seen my friend here next to me?
Yeah. What is that? A catfish?
This is Harry the Haddock.
Oh, you got Harry the Haddock. You got it.
People thought I was lying when I was going to buy a Harry the Haddock, but no, this is the kind of mascot of Grimsby Town.
Yeah.
So they are the Mariners, and they're in FA Cup quarterfinal action this weekend against Brighton. And if you saw this at the Southampton game, I knew this about Grimsby, but it looked amazing in this game. And I think a lot of our American listeners and African listeners would have seen it for the first time in the game. They all take Harry the Haddock in, and so when they celebrate, there was like about maybe 300 or 400 of these. Yeah. In the crowd. So I bought one because I thought it would be fun. Plus, you give money to Grimsby. Good luck to them and all that sort of stuff. Hope they win against Brighton, the scourge of West Ham this weekend. But I didn't realize it was going to be this big. I don't know what I was thinking. Maybe I assumed everyone in the crowd holding them were children and they just look massive in tiny hands. It's enormous. This is like...
It's big.
It's like it's a 4-foot inflatable haddock. And now I don't know what to do with it. So
see, you should have got two. It could have been like the Bammers that you have at sporting events, like do, and then you can give it to your kids after Harry's run his course.
Yes. I mean, I love it. I don't know what to do with it, but I also found out today, so we did our serious show on the Tuesday, and I mentioned this to the listeners, and some I've been saying to people, international shipping is available, right? So Grimsby have got their biggest game for like a century or whatever in the FA Cup this weekend against Brighton quarterfinal. And I'm saying to listeners in America, international shipping is available, which it is. Mine has arrived. I am not a Grimsby Town fan, and they're out of stock on the website.
Oh, really?
So there might be maybe 6,000 fans at the Amex this weekend cheering on Grimsby, and I envisage 5,999 of them with their Harry the Haddocks, then a small boy who just wanted a Harry the Haddock for this special game, and it's in my grubby little hands.
Damn
so sorry,
you,
Tim.
Rennie.
Sorry, little Timmy. Rennie. Little Timmy from Grimsby, as if his life's not hard enough. Here he is. I'll try and... I don't know if I can stand this up. It's going to be quite...
You can do it. Come on. You can do it.
I want to do the show. Haven't got the time. So I want to do Where's Danny Been? I want to find out about Las Vegas and the LAFC game. Of course, there was the presentation and all that sort of stuff as well. And Gareth Bale turned up and all that. So I do want to ask you about that. But I did want to start with this story because you'll be off covering the USMNT, hashtag. Is it next week, week after? And this Greg Berhalter story, I just think is fascinating. And I have a void in my life for drama since we lost the Rebecca Vardy, Colleen Rooney, Wagatha Christie story. So I like this. Now, I will just caveat this by saying I think it's really funny, this whole thing, but I'm not diminishing domestic violence at all. And if you are suffering from domestic violence, make sure you reach out to somebody. The only way it's going to get better is by doing that. So I'll caveat all that by saying I don't think that particular aspect is funny. The rest of it is really funny. So Greg Berhalter currently isn't hashtag USMNT manager because of this whole incredible story where Danielle and Claudio Reyna got in touch with the high command at US Soccer to relay a story from 1992, which has now been investigated, and Greg Berhalter is, for the want of a better phrase, cleared to reapply for the job he lost on December 31st. It's more complicated than that, but that's broadly what's happening. But this investigation has thrown out some incredible things. One interview in the investigation described Claudio Reyna's outrage over Gio Reyna's treatment at the World Cup as inappropriate, bullying, and mean-spirited. Essentially, what is written in this report is that Claudio Reyna and Danielle Reyna were the ultimate overbearing parents at a six-a-side tournament on a Sunday, were not happy their boy wasn't being picked, were not happy with the manager, who's like an old friend of Claudio Reyna as well. And there was one part of this as well. In an email in 2018, Claudio complained about a female referee in a match Gio played in, saying, quote, "And in all honesty, can we get real and have male refs for a game like this? It's embarrassing, guys. What are we trying to prove? A game like this deserves better attention." And there's more of the behavior of the Reyna family in terms of Gio in Qatar as well, which, I mean, they do not come out well from this report at all. Cursing and acting horribly come up a lot. And actually, there's a line in this which reminded me of Agatha Christie. Here we go. Quote, "There were 150 people in the Friends and Family program at this year's World Cup. All were having a great time, except for 5 people who were absolutely miserable. The 5 were cursing and acting horribly. It was the Reynas." Talk to me, Danny. What's going on here? What's the fallout from this report, Ben?
Yeah, the fallout. Listen, this was a nuclear bomb with regards to U.S. soccer, and this is a difficult one to talk about because there's so many variables at play. I've made it very clear during my kind of first experiences with the national team, being around Claudio Reyna, being around Greg Berhalter, as players, they always treated me very well. I enjoyed my time around them as players. Once they retired, got to know them differently. I wouldn't say I'm friends with either of them, but I'm friendly with both of them. And to watch them have the success they've had post-playing career, from, Claudio going into overseeing NYCFC, the launch there, overseeing the launch of Austin FC, to watching Greg become the manager that he was at Columbus and then for the U.S. men's national team. Let me pull it back. In a time in which we should be moving forward with such great momentum over what I think was a very strong showing at the World Cup for this group of players, we find ourselves in a really difficult time as U.S. soccer fans because, number one, we don't have a head coach. Number two, we don't have a general manager. And number three, we no longer have a sporting director, as Brian McBride has stepped down from his general manager role and Ernie Stewart has left U.S. soccer to take over PSV Eindhoven. It feels like we're kind of in that phase after we missed out on the World Cup, where Dave Sarachan did an admirable job of filling in after Bruce Arena stepped down, and everyone was calling for U.S. soccer to be burnt to the ground, that everything was trending in the right direction. And from the end of the World Cup to now, which is effectively 3 months, it feels like a nuclear bomb's gone off. If you would have told me at the start of the World Cup that Gio Reyna was only going to play something around like 54 minutes for the entirety of the World Cup, I would have told you something has gone horribly wrong, or there must have been some type of major injury that he was dealing with that was unknown to any of us, because the trajectory of this young man's career is nothing short of extraordinary. And he does have the capability of being an elite international player. And you can see glimpses of what he's capable of doing at Borussia Dortmund, whether it's in the Bundesliga or in the Champions League. So whatever transpired within that camp and the relationship between Gio and Greg Berhalter from manager to player became very, very complicated. And this is something that we talk about with camps, with national teams, with going into World Cups, is it's not always about the best players. It's about the best group of players that you can get through a camp together and all be heading in the right direction. So you've got all of these different variables, right? Then you get to the relationship between Greg Berhalter and Claudio Reyna. You get to the relationship between Rosalind and Danielle. You've got two guys that have grown up playing soccer together, playing football together, similar pathways, albeit different, that spent some time in the U.S. college system and immediately moved overseas and traversed different countries at various levels of success. And we're real big. Claudio, a staple of U.S. soccer. Greg, a very, very solid center back in U.S. soccer as players. The relationship of the wives playing college soccer together. All of these things tell us the history of these two families and how close they were. So to see it unravel with such distaste and to see it unravel publicly, I mean, there's no right words for something like this. There's no right way to describe this. It can be disgust, it can be outrage, it could be empathy, and it could be disappointment. And all of those things individually can stand true, and all of those collectively, I think, maybe do the best job of us trying to verbalize what we're seeing from the outside looking in. I can tell you from outside U.S. soccer, everybody looks at this and like, clown show. Like, what are you guys doing? How is this so dramatic? Being something that's behind the scenes now coming out publicly, and the parental control, and where's the policies, and how do you, and so, you know, when I look at kind of the management of this situation for Ernie Stewart and Brian McBride, the complexities of trying to manage prior relationships and friendships and playing careers. And remember, all four of these guys, Ernie Stewart, Brian McBride, Claudio Reyna, Greg Berhalter, played at World Cups together.
Yeah.
These guys went to battle on the international stage together. So there's a complexity in managing the situations. But when you throw children into the mix, we all know how complicated that gets. We all know, we've watched this. We've watched helicopter parents. We've watched hands-on parents. We've watched hands-off parents. And however parents decide to manage the children's career or pathway or whatever that looks like, that's up to them. You know, there's consequences with decisions and choices that come out to play. So as I try to, I don't know, unravel what this crazy web has been over the last 3 months, all I can say is I hope going forward, and I'm going to read a quick statement, because at the end of this, Alston and Bird come to a couple different conclusions. And I've heard a lot of people talk about safe sport and the safe sport kind of umbrella that is encapsulated not only kind of U.S. soccer, but more the domestic, whether it's NWSL, it's USL, it's Major League Soccer. And a lot of that, I always felt like safe sport when we were talking about that was protecting the female side of the game, trying to make sure that everybody was in an environment that was inclusive and protective. And we've seen kind of the fallout of kind of the research and the investigations on the women's side of the game, where safe sport came in, and whether it's the Yates report and the implementation of the 12-step program being extraordinarily helpful going forward and setting kind of these standards of what needs to be done and the protective balances that need to be there, so that when something is out of line, unnecessary, unsavory, just flat out wrong, that players are protected. First thing I thought about was, is this falling under the umbrella of safe sport? Because I never thought about the men's side of the game, the men's national side of the game, men's national team side of the game being exposed to something like this. So when it was reported, how it was investigated, how both parties were forced to participate in this situation, and then ultimately the outcome, it doesn't look great for the Reynas. It absolutely doesn't. Yeah. There are 100% are consequences based on the actions. For Greg Berhalter, the transparency about the incident, what seems to be the immediate acknowledgement of responsibility for the situation at play back in 1992, and the movement forward for his family, his wife, his children, everybody, and I guess I'm going to use the air quotes, the clearing of his name professionally, which now affords him the opportunity, not just to be a candidate to be the head coach for the U.S. men's national team, but to move on for whatever job is available to him in the future. I want to read this statement because I thought this was maybe the most important outcome of all of this from Alston and Bird, excuse me. The quote, the need to revisit U.S. soccer's policies concerning appropriate parental conduct and communication with staff at the national team level. We will be updating the policies as we continue to work to ensure environments for all participants in our games. This is something that, at least in the United States, right? There's various moments throughout sporting, and I don't care if it's travel volleyball, I don't care if it's soccer, I don't care if it's baseball, I don't care if it's football, I don't care, whatever, cheerleading, dance. There is heavy involvement from parents. We know that. There's the micromanaging of the children and trying to get the best possible situations for their children. What this does, because we've never seen it at such an incredibly high level, is I think now it creates kind of a set of standards for the way that parents need to act going forward and what the involvement looks like. Because this was such an elite level of involvement because of the complexity of the relationships, because of the complexity of the manager, Greg Berhalter, the complexity of Claudio Reyna and his role at Austin FC and being involved. And Claudio had interviewed for the general manager role back in 2019 as well. So as I try to verbalize this and all the verbal diarrhea I just said, at the end of the day, I never wanted to talk about this. I don't like this. I hate seeing stuff like this play out in the public eye. And I'm hopeful now that we can step forward in a positive manner, that Gio Reyna can continue his career, that he can somehow figure out a way with U.S. soccer to hammer out whatever details need to be hammered out going forward to continue to participate in the U.S. men's national team role. And that us as U.S. soccer can figure out whatever the future looks like, because you need new leadership behind the scenes, because Ernie Stewart and Brian McBride have left. And sooner rather than later, you've got to figure out the direction you want to go with regards to a head coach, a manager of this group, because in a time when you should be continuing to trend forward and trending upwards, you are now placing all of what I would say the development of U.S. soccer's men's national team on the shoulders of the players, because we're not sure who's going to be the next leader of this group.
I mean, it's an incredible story, and you covered a lot of ground there. And I think it's really interesting that the bit you read out, it's like one of those things that we have it all the time in the UK, where we have, in terms of government, we have an unwritten constitution, and most things are done by convention. And one of the conventions, I would imagine, of very, very top-level soccer, international football, is don't text the manager, mum. And that's one of those things that you think, yeah, it goes without saying. Of course I wouldn't. Like, I wouldn't have my mum text my employer, or even if they were old friends. Like, it's my job, it's my career, you need to leave it. And that's an unwritten rule.
Yeah.
Whereas it seems like US soccer at the very top men's level might need to have that rule put in. Give the manager, I don't know, a work phone, and don't let the players' mums and dads have it. It seems bizarre, but that seems like it might have cured at least some of these issues. Really briefly, because I want to move on to loads of other things, and we haven't got all day on this podcast. Greg Berhalter, he can now apply for his old job back. Would you tell him to stuff it if you were Greg?
No, I wouldn't. And this is another really fascinating conversation, because I am of the belief that there were three types of U.S. men's national team fans when Greg Berhalter was named manager. One, that were like, no chance, not the right guy, never going to give him the opportunity, because of the dynamics of Jay Berhalter, his brother, being involved in U.S. soccer. Those that were indifferent that his brother was at U.S. soccer at the time when he was hired, and that were going to be willing to give him a chance. And the third that were, it's my manager. It's my manager for the U.S. men's national team. I'm going to back him. When you would have asked, and I don't care, you can insert name here. It could be Jose Mourinho, or it could be Tata Martino. If you would have said, when he took over that group, you win Nations League and you beat Mexico. You win CONCACAF Gold Cup and you beat Mexico. You qualify for the World Cup with this young group of players when everyone was kind of really kicking the can down the line and saying, it's really not this one. It's the next World Cup in 2026. That's when we'll be in our prime. He did all three of those. Then you move forward to the World Cup. He got them out of the group. in a time where not many people were saying that this group had the experience nor the capability of getting out of the group. Now, the Haaland situation, and does Pulisic score? Does that change the dynamic? Does Louis van Gaal and his adjustments, did Greg get caught not paying attention or couldn't adjust quick enough? Or was it just a difference in level of caliber of player? Up for debate, constantly up for debate, and will be up for debate forever. But I think Greg did enough to continue in his role to be the head coach of the U.S. men's national team. I also believe that there were probably coaches that are better suited and more qualified than Greg Berhalter to be the head coach of the U.S. men's national team. And yet I haven't seen anyone outside of the conversation about Jesse Marsch who has been 100%, that's the guy. I haven't seen a name where someone goes, yes. And everyone's like, yes, this is our guy for U.S. soccer. This is the guy that's going to take this group of players to the next level.
Is that possible? Does that exist?
I don't know. I really don't. I think that's why
no manager has ever been hired anywhere for anything with universal acclaim, right? Ever.
No, you're right. But like, do you go find like the Louis van Gaal type of manager?
You just want to do the voice. Come on, be honest with us.
Enjoy some mince pies on the vine. Or do you do like what Morocco does and maybe you find, or Scaloni, right? Scaloni at the time taking over Argentina, like no one thought that Scaloni was the man, and then he grew into the man. So this is where, if you would have said to me, Ernie Stewart, Brian McBride, had this situation not unraveled, I'll call it an entanglement because the Oscars were just here in LA. Well, I was in LA yesterday, an entanglement. Had this not played itself out, would Greg Berhalter probably have been retired? I would have said yes. I would have said, yeah, of course he's going to get a new deal. Look what he's done. He's checked a lot of these boxes. And by the way, he's still growing as a young manager. He's only in his mid 40s, right? So, or maybe mid to late 40s now. But yeah, I think this is the conundrum for U.S. soccer is, in the meantime, Anthony Hudson, an assistant coach, didn't do great in Major League Soccer with the Colorado Rapids, is now running effectively the U.S. men's national team. 2 friendlies in January are one thing. In a week and a half's time, we start Nations League, which is still Nations League for CONCACAF. We are the reigning champions of Nations League. So you've got a game at Granada, a game at home against El Salvador in Orlando. And you've got a game that was just announced before we started recording this program in April, which is an international friendly against our most hated, biggest rival against Mexico down in Glendale, Arizona. And then you going into the Gold Cup this summer. So decisions have to be made. And oh, by the way, U.S. soccer is focusing on the preparation for the Women's World Cup in New Zealand with the women's national team. So it felt like everything was stable and settled and we're going in the right direction. And then the nuclear bomb went off from the inside out. And now there's more questions than there are answers from this level. But this group, put my pen down, this group, this player group right now, I don't think we could be in a better phase because now we are empowering this group of players to be the leaders. Not the manager, not the honchos at U.S. Soccer, this group of players to hold themselves accountable, to take a next step forward, and to build upon what I think was a very successful World Cup performance.
And if you don't, Gio's mum will call you. 49, by the way, Greg Berhalter. So I'm delighted the way you said that was mid-40s because I'm 37 now. And if anyone asks, I say I'm in my early mid-30s. Which, of course, is early, late 30s. It's not true, but it sounds better. Let's move off the USA for now. I want to talk about some of the incidents in the Premier League this weekend that have had a little bit of drag. They didn't happen on Saturday and Sunday and then end there. They have consequence. Casemiro. Now, Casemiro, we've spoken about him previously, the impact he's had at Manchester United. But one thing we do know about Casemiro is that he is a dirty, dirty bastard. And for years at Real Madrid, he has gotten away with all sorts of terrible fouls. And even a few weeks ago, when he got suspended for the Arsenal game, that was a straight red tackle. Like, he got a yellow card in the Crystal Palace game. I was at Selhurst Park on the night, and everyone's having a meltdown. And, he's going to miss the Arsenal game. He should have missed the Arsenal game and 2 after that with that terrible knee-high, studs-up tackle on Wolf Zaha, if memory serves. He then gets his first red card in English football for trying to strangle poor Will Hughes. God bless him. And then this weekend, he does a bad tackle. I forget the Southampton player. Was it Alcaraz, I think? And he does bounce off the top of the ball. But again, I always think this with red card conversations. It doesn't matter if he touches the ball. It's about the brutality in the tackle. Is it reckless? Does it endanger the opponent? Those sorts of things. The touching of the ball and getting the ball first is for the birds. It's nothing. It's not in the rules. It doesn't matter. In this particular incident, that is a challenge that endangers the opponent. It was a clear red card decision, and I think they got the right decision in the end. But then we have the tears, and we have the kind of like, it was almost like you just found out you didn't get first chair violinist in the school orchestra. You know, it was like Lisa Simpson finding out there was someone else better at saxophone than her. Like, it was weird. And they're all hugging him, and it's like, yes, Casemiro, this is consequence. These are the consequences you should have been experiencing for most of your career, but you've been getting away with it for reasons that are inexplicable to us. But it used to, I suppose you could say Fernandinho is a similar sort of guy for Man City and got away with this sort of crap for years and didn't.
Busquets,
But suddenly, Dunny, Casemiro is not getting away with it. He's not handling it very well. And Casemiro now will have been suspended for 8 Premier League games this season for bookings and for now 2 red cards. Talk to me about it.
Yeah, I think he's trying to lift the shorts of all the players around him. I think he is, as we've seen, I think such a fantastic addition to Manchester United and to this midfield, even though it took him probably 4 or 5 good games to work himself into the Casemiro that we thought, because I can remember when I had Twitter tweeting something about like, what happened to Casemiro? Because that's not the Real Madrid Casemiro that we saw. But I think as much as, you know, we've talked about Bruno and the hands and the throwing himself and all that, I think what Casemiro has done is he's been kind of that inspirational kind of guy that everyone can look to and be like, yo, we got Casemiro. Like, we got Casemiro. We're good. We're straight. Like, we're okay. Everything's gonna be like, he looks at you and you're like, oh yeah, I got to run a little bit more because that's Casemiro. I think it's that type of feel. Now,
he's let him down now, though, big time.
Well,
massively.
no, he's let him down on a couple of occasions. Now, the yellow cards, I'm okay with yellow cards, especially in that position. I know that my defensive midfielders, the team that I'm going to root for, it doesn't matter what team, that guys are going to, it's just the nature of the position. It's the nature of counterattacking football. It's the nature of professional fouls, tactical fouls, whatever you want to call it. That is the position that it's going to happen. Same with outside backs. It's breakup plays. We saw it in that game in particular when the ball, I think it was Casemiro gave the ball away, and it was Lisandro Martinez had to pick up the yellow in that game because he didn't want, he got caught in between just inside of his own half. So those type of things happen. You can't excuse the hands to the neck on Will Hughes. He knew it. As soon as it happened, he was done. Will Hughes was kind of laughing about it the entire time. Like, he had a huge smile.
And other players, we should say, have put their hands in a similar position this season and got away with it.
Yeah, and again, it comes down to kind of this gray area, and we saw it a lot this weekend, the intervention of VAR, and what is a clear and obvious mistake, and what are the bullet points that have to be, or the boxes that have to be checked for VAR to intervene. In the run of play, it was judged as a yellow card. Is it a red card? Absolutely. I've said this since I was a kid. I remember one of my coaches said it to me. The moment that you turn your stud sideways and you can see the bottom of your studs, and if there's, number one, if your studs are off the ground, you've allowed the referee to make a decision. If you've pushed through and your studs are off the ground, you've allowed the referee to make a very easy decision. Even if you win the ball, and it's a different game for us growing up, Tom, those type of tackles, a strong challenge. The John Terry type tackle. You win the ball, you go through the player, you nick him, you do whatever. Like, yeah, I stuck him, but I won the ball. It's okay. The game's different now. So VAR intervention, yes, absolutely correct to tell the referee, I think you need to have a look at this. I'm going to suggest you look at the monitor for serious foul play. It is serious foul play. He's come through. He's raised the leg. He's caught him. Yes, he's won the ball. That doesn't matter in 2023. So, okay, we get through all of that. I think he's an emotional guy. I really do. And I think he realized, to your point, and by the way, it's Brighton away, Newcastle away, Everton home, the games he's going to miss. I think that's correct. But I'm a knucklehead. I'm not sure.
And he misses the FA Cup quarter-final this weekend as well. So it's 4.
Yep.
One in the cup and 3 in the
Fulham.
league.
Yep, and against Fulham. So I think he realized it's another 3 weeks on top of international duty that we got to go away, that I'm not going to be available. He's effectively going to be out for almost a month when it's all said and done, in a run-up of games that are incredibly important for Manchester United to maintain their top 4 finish. So yeah, I think the emotion of breaking down is the recognition of heat of the moment, red mist, could have won the ball, but I showed my studs, got caught with my hands in the cookie jar. And now I think by the players coming over to him, it's like, we got you. Don't worry. It's going to be okay. They're trying to make him feel better. But you could tell he was devastated because rightly so, he was sent off.
Well, rightly or wrongly, there is a target on Casemiro, and it does happen with players. There are certain reputations of certain players where they're more likely to be carded than otherwise. It used to happen with Andy Carroll all the time. I know he used to swing the elbow around a lot, but also it wasn't always as bad as what other players had done. I always used to kind of note that.
He did do Christian Eriksen. He did do.
That's
Christian
true.
Eriksen.
That's true. Yeah. He didn't get a yellow for that. Did he?
No, he didn't get anything.
No, nothing.
No.
But it used to happen. I mean, there's players. It's been like this, right? You're going to get a yellow, whatever happens. You're not going to be given the benefit of the doubt. I think about kind of Mitrovic these days. So I think he's in that category. Whereas for Real Madrid, he certainly was allowed to get away with a lot, and certainly in the Champions League, it's not going to happen now. Depending, I mean, that's why Erik ten Hag does all that. Looking like a budget detective from a Scandinavian drama in his role neck. I think maybe that there is a possibility here that something wider is going on. Manipulating us. So next time when Casemiro's back in May, he might get a little decision going his way. I wanted to ask you about another decision this weekend, because the VAR thing is really interesting, because Howard Webb is here now.
Yeah.
And we were looking forward to the arrival of Howard Webb after Mike Riley carked it so badly as head of VAR. And some of the other guys are going as well. Neil Swarbrick is going, and John Moss has already gone. And who's the other one? I forget his face. I'm looking at it now. Is it Chris Foy has gone as well, I think, maybe. And what annoys me around this, right? And you've worked with Howard Webb in terms of broadcast and MLS when he was over there.
Yeah.
The directive is that they are going to give it back to the referee on the field, the final say. They're going to try and take it away from going to VAR more. And maybe we saw that a bit this weekend with the Anthony Taylor one. But I can't stand it personally, because it feels like the wrong approach. Why? Because all we should be doing is giving them their phone on the strap, like you're going out for a run over the park. And if something happens, you go, oh, hold on a sec. Oh, yeah, actually, it's a penalty, isn't it? That's how you give it back to the referee. You take away the opinion of some person in Stockley Park, West London HQ. You take that away and you just give them their phone. Like, I can watch an episode of Seinfeld when I go for a jog. It's a piece of piss, like that. Oh, yeah, look, there's George Costanza doing his thing. Like, that's all you have to do. And it takes me to Newcastle Wolverhampton Wanderers this weekend. Now, it was a massive result, this, by the way. Wolves are in that kind of pile up of teams who are trying to get away from the relegation battle, which I want to talk about on today's program before we're out of time. And Newcastle are trying to, of course, get into the Champions League, Europa League, whatever. Now, at this moment, no one scored. Ball goes back to Nick Pope, who's not great with his feet. And of course, he got sent off recently against Liverpool for that bad challenge that cost him the Moose Cup final. Bad first touch. Raul Jimenez, Mexico striker, nicks it off him. And then Nick Pope takes him out. Like, Jimenez instigates the contact, if you like, but it doesn't matter. The contact is there, and it happens because Nick Pope has miscontrolled it and been robbed of the ball. Now, that's a foul. That's a penalty. That's a red card. There is no doubt in my mind that is what should have happened. Andy Madley, the referee, who can see it, has decided no. Maybe he thinks Jimenez has done too much to draw the contact. I don't know. They don't give press conferences afterwards. They don't justify their decisions to us, which they probably should, even in writing. I would like to see detailed breakdowns about why they did these things. But then you get to the whole Howard Webb thing now. Referee on the field has got to get this right. We've got to make sure that guy is the guy that makes the final decision. Whereas anyone watching that on a monitor would go, it's foul that. What if the referee could have just gone, oh, I'm 40 yards away, I can't see it. Yep, that's definitely, looks at his phone, that's it. And he gives it. He doesn't give it. And again, it comes down to something I'm always bringing up. We should have a VAR czar. If you're going to have VAR, you have one single person giving their opinion on what a decision should be. And that's how you get a level of consistency, because you're always referring to the same person's opinion. But if we don't want to do that, you just got to give them their phone. Like, we live in the West in 2023. There's not one person listening to this who's not listening on their phone, who's not near their phone. They could be watching on their phone. We've got our phones. So give the ref's the only person in St. James's Park, and the players, of course, who don't have their phones on them. And all I think you've got to do there is have a quick look, but instead he's waiting for someone else to tell him he's made a mistake. And they're always going to be reticent to do that, because people are good people. I don't want to tell you made a mistake, and so they let it go.
Yeah, and again, I don't know how many times we've told this story, whether on Grumpy Pundits or here, but the reality is, you put all these referees in the same room, and you ask them, pen, no pen. It could be 50-50, completely divided, or it could be 99, and there's still that one guy that thinks, oh, no, that's not a pen. No chance of the pen. And this is the subjectivity of this situation, is that even when you have kind of the VAR specialists, if you will, or the most experienced players at the end of, or most experienced referees at the end of their physical output, then being placed into VAR because they're the most experienced, right? They have the eyes, they understand, they've got the feel for the game. All of those things can be true. They still look at it differently. There's still ego involved. Is it a big time referee with a big time VAR? Do they like each other? Do they not like each other? Does he respect the way he calls the game? Does he not respect the way he calls the game? Does he think he's letting the game get out of control? Does he think he's running the game too tight? These are all like, when I say gray area, this is the gray area. Yeah. And then you throw in kind of these boxes that have to be checked, or these bullet points, if you will, that Howard Webb is mandating. Yeah, we want the referee to be the one with the final decision. Great. No problem. But then my question inevitably becomes, where's the accountability afterwards if somebody who is in charge for that specific game makes a huge mistake, gets it wrong? It's like, well, there is accountability. They're taking off these next set of games, but there's no. I don't want referees to become more of a target, but there is a sense of a responsibility that's needed for when mistakes are being made. So there's no
point in VAR if they're going to tell them when they're wrong, though, is there? Well, when you're actually wrong, but there's a debate about they might be wrong.
Well, then you show up
and having VAR.
And then Howard Webb is going to go talk to Mikel Arteta, or go talk to De Zerbi, who then is going to go public afterwards and say, don't ever waste my time again. Like, I appreciate you trying, but like, look what just happened once again. We lost 2 more points because of your referees' decisions. So, yeah, I mean, even this weekend, and listen, Jimenez, it's a foul anywhere on the field. Yeah. I don't care if it's in the box or not. It's a foul anywhere on the field. On top of that, it's a poor touch. There is a collision. Is Jimenez leaning? Absolutely. But he's already made his first touch towards goal. He's not kicking it to the corner flag. It does not make sense how it's not a penalty. But even some of these challenges this weekend, like, as bad as Casemiro's was, and absolutely correctly was judged a red card with intervention from VAR, there were multiple tackles this week, multiple tackles where guys are getting caught studs high in the shin, up below the knee, and there's not even a foul being called.
Ricardo Pereira, probably the worst one.
How does he get away with that? So how is that not a clear and obvious mistake? How is that not dangerous play? Endangering the. So we talk about this every show. We don't want to talk about VAR, and yet here we are every single week, because some of these decisions are such monumental decisions that completely change not only the course of the game, but change what the standings look like. 3 points, 2 points, 1 point. Those are all huge, huge issues for some of these teams that are either trying to pull away from the relegation battle or trying to make sure that they finish top 4.
And the gravitas of these things, it's going to grow massively over the next 12 odd weeks until we get to the end of the season. And the fact that we started with one head of refereeing, and we're now with another head of refereeing, and they're fundamentally changing the way that we're interpreting VAR and refereeing multiple times in the season. We had to start with Mike Riley. We had to fix with Mike Riley. We had Howard Webb coming in, bringing in Howard Webb's new way. So basically, got 3 types of refereeing to deal with this season. Massive problems and massive questions to answer every single weekend. Just give them their phones. And speaking of things that are going to be massive towards the end of this season, I want to talk to you about the relegation battle, because this is incredible. So currently Crystal Palace, and they're a really interesting barometer, Crystal Palace, because they are the most mediocre team in the world. They're just nothing. The only thing they're famous for is being AFC Richmond. Beyond that, they signed Wilfried Zaha 10 years ago, and Simon Jordan owned them. Yeah. Anything else? Ian Wright? No, he's known for Arsenal. Don't at me. So Crystal Palace sit 12th this season after 26 games. Last season, they were 12th. Season before that, they were 12th at this stage of the season. They are the embodiment of mediocre in the Premier League, almost by definition. 2 seasons ago, they were sitting in that position on 36 points with 10 wins. Last season, they were sitting in that position with 33 points on 7 wins. This season, they're in that position on 27 points with 6 wins. That's a drop-off in the same position of 9 points. Another reason why that's really interesting. We go to bottom of the table from where Crystal Palace are. Remember, always 12th. It's where they live. 36 points 2 seasons ago. Bottom of the league, Sheffield United, 11 points. Last season, 33 points. Bottom of the league, 17 points. This season, 27 points. Bottom of the league, 22 points. That's 5 points between 12 and 20, as compared to, never do live math, 25 points was the differential 2 seasons ago. And last season, 16. This season, it's 5.
For 9 teams.
For 9 teams.
Yeah, that's the telltale.
That's not relegation zone. That's bottom of the league.
Yeah.
What? I don't know if I can swear yet. We didn't clear that with Tim. So I won't do a sorry, Tim, here, in case it's going to make the edit hard. I can. Great. Hashtag sorry, Tim. Dunny, what the is going on?
It's been a while, man. We haven't had a sorry, Tim, in a while. It is extraordinary. I mean, again, 9 teams, 5 points separate. We've got 11 matches left, something like that. Some maybe 12.
Yep.
Hold on to your shorts, man. Hold on to your shorts, because just when you thought that the Sean Dyche appointment was correct, just when you thought that, oh my God, David Moyes, why didn't you change it before the start of the World Cup? Just when you thought, oh, we'll sack Jesse Marsch, he's the problem. Just when you thought Hasenhüttl, we can upgrade from him. Jesse Marsch, no. Oh, let's get this guy. Oh yeah, let's go with this guy. Who's it? What's his name? I'm not sure. And then you just think about who else could possibly out of this group that has consistently shown us that they can win games. Not win games against the top 6, quote unquote, the top 6, the big dogs in the Premier League. Who can beat each other? That's it. But
why? I mean, it's always a bit like that, right? It's always a little bit like there's always one cut adrift. This year there is not. So Norwich last year as ever. Before that was West Brom. Previously, Watford were in that mix as too. So we had 2 adrift last year and 2 adrift the season before. No one is adrift. Now, is that because the squads that came up invested so heavily, ridiculously heavily in the shape of Nottingham Forest, that they aren't down there? Is that because almost everyone has sacked their manager? Is that because teams like West Ham and Everton and Wolves have massively underperformed? I mean, West Ham I know I talk about them because they're my team, but the underperformance from them it's genuinely incredible to observe how you can fall off the cliff to that degree. I mean, they haven't just fallen apart a little bit. They have disintegrated, having spent £160 million on players. I mean, what's the reason so many teams are in such a similar boat where usually there's 2 or 3 leagues at this point?
Yeah, I would say the manager effect is absolutely important. But I think the easiest argument, and I don't think people are going to buy this, but I think the easiest argument is that teams are getting stronger. And I know that sounds crazy when we're talking about, hold on a second, you're talking about a relegation battle and you're trying to justify teams getting stronger. I think there is obviously some teams spend way more than other teams. Some teams have the correct infrastructure, the scouting network, and the ability to go into the room with said player or said player's family or said player's agent and utilize kind of the big city magic. They can utilize, if they've done their due diligence, that, hey, this is the Premier League. and we are a club that will give you the opportunity, and then we will sell you to a bigger club should you perform at such a. I think you are seeing more of a sellable product on top of better players coming in. I mean, listen, I don't mean to poo all over you, Tom Rennie, but the package, Paqueta, there's no way Paqueta's a West Ham player.
I'm not even sure he's a footballer. He is terrible.
But Paqueta's also the guy that started for Brazil, right? At the World Cup. So I honestly, truly believe that teams are getting stronger. Teams are then performing better, individual players. Teams are then selling players because we're talking about extraordinary salaries, extraordinary upkeep for facilities and stadiums and infrastructure, balancing the books, trying to find the net spend and all of that BS that comes into justifying success versus failure. I just think there's not a lot of variables between these 9 clubs that would suggest that, yes, some are underperforming. Yes, some are overperforming. But maybe that's just who most of these clubs are at this stage of the season. Like we always say, we wait till October to get a good feel for what a Premier League side looks like. I mean, we're mid-March. These teams really, I mean, are they really going to impress us? I think that's where the managers and the players, whoever can get on a run, we're going to say, that saved the season. Because we'll use this conversation as a reference point to be like, hey, remember mid-March when I did that thing? 9 teams, 5-point difference between 12th and 20th position. Like, man, what a run they had. Can you believe they finally put it together? Or, man, that parachute just collapsed, exploded, and that was a free fall down into the championship.
I want to ask you how you stay up in a minute, but before I do, one further thing from this analysis of the last 2 seasons before this, which is really interesting. So 2 seasons ago, the bottom 3 was Fulham, West Brom, and Sheffield United, right? Newcastle were the first team out of it in 17th position on 28 points. This season, every single team we're talking about will be below Newcastle. Mm-hmm. Every single team this season from 12th to 20th, going back 2 seasons at this exact position, would be in the relegation zone. Yeah, which I think is just incredible to see the drop-off in these teams. I went to West Ham, Aston Villa this weekend. I've also been to see a few of these teams recently. I'm working on Southampton against Brentford Wednesday night, and I've seen Forest recently and Everton recently too. And in fact, Leicester, I watched them a couple of weeks ago as well. And I'll tell you what's really interesting to me, and I think this is the difference. And I always go back to Alan Kirbishley. Remember Alan Kirbishley? He was Charlton manager for a long time, kept them in the league somehow. He took over at West Ham during the Great Escape season, Carlos Tevez and all that. And he had this great line, which has just stuck with me for 20 years odd now. And it was, all that matters is 3 points. Draws don't matter. Big losses don't matter. Goal difference, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
3 points, 3 points, 3 points. That's it. Better to win 1 and lose 2 than go for a draw. And that's how they famously lost to Tottenham in one game where they lost 4-3, and Paul Stalteri scored this kind of infamous late goal for Tottenham, which they
Canadian international.
They still lord it over us whenever it happens. And it's been like years and years. And I went to West Ham Villa at the weekend, and it was 1-1. West Ham actually played quite well. I'll give them their due. They did play quite well. It wasn't as embarrassing as the Brighton game previously. It's not been great. You know, David Moyes said we improved, and I thought, yeah, in the Brighton game, you kind of vomited all over the floor. At this time you vomited in the toilet, you know, so it's a step in the right direction. The flushes broke, sadly, but you still vomited somewhere we can clean it up. But 6 minutes came up at the end, and everyone was like, 6 minutes, right, go for it. Let's get this win. Villa couldn't give a toss. They're mid-table. They played all right, but there wasn't much desire there. You know, they're all about next season. I'm looking forward to seeing them next season. But 6 minutes came up and, man, there was nothing. Yeah. There was ultra caution. There was respect the point. And I'm just thinking, you gutless fucking worm. Sorry, Tim. Like, 3 points is what matters here. Let's get after them. And we've got a £30 million striker. We've got no time for it today, but I think at one point we'll have a scam-acker discussion as to why you signed someone you do not want, and then you're chasing a goal and you don't bring him on. Yeah. Oh, his metrics aren't quite as high as we.
You just don't trust him.
You just don't trust him and don't like him and don't know how to use him. Don't give me that crap. But there was no desire. And then I watched some of the other teams. I think Southampton should have beaten Man United. Nothing but desire in previous games. Bournemouth, when they lost against Arsenal, terrific. When they beat Liverpool, from the first minute, they thought we'd get something here. Everton, my God, it's disgusting to watch, but you knew it would be.
Yeah.
But there was a point where Seamus Coleman cleared one out of the 6-yard box and he celebrated like Ireland just won Eurovision.
Yeah.
Like, it was incredible. Wolverhampton Wanderers, look at some of their recent performances. Even in the loss at the weekend against Newcastle, they were robbed by a referee's bad decision, but also they fought for it all the way through. Then I look at Palace, I look at Leicester, I look at West Ham, I look at Leeds. Okay, fair enough, the Brighton game, but I mean, in the recent 5, 6, 7 weeks, I don't know. I don't know about Leeds' quality. That's a different thing. I shouldn't have put them in this. But I look at Leicester, look at Everton, and look at West Ham, and I think, where's it going to come from? And Dunny, if you're going to stay up, you have to win. This is one of those seasons where Norwich and Sheffield United and Derby and Sunderland, they ain't going to help you.
Yeah.
They ain't going to help you by being significantly crap. I think that whole discussion about there's 3 teams worse than you, I'm not sure that rides this year. So
that's a good point.
How do these teams stay up? What would you do to make
dumb it down?
Tell me.
Dumb it down. Yeah, dumb it down. As much as we talk about Dyche football, and I still think it's a bit unfair, but listen, it's the reality, right? Your point about Seamus Coleman. I said this weekend on the broadcast of LAFC when Chiellini came in that there was kind of a prideful way to see the game out. And I referenced Chiellini and Bonucci and how many times were a Champions League match or a big match in Serie A where those two would make a crunching tackle, a transition opportunity, break up a play, and they'd be like screaming like they scored a goal in the World Cup, or like in high-fiving and jumping into each other. And there was pride. You in a situation like this, corners, set pieces, drawing fouls offensively, those are even that much more important. Creating something from throw-ins in the final third, whipping balls in, variation of service. You don't have to be Mikel Arteta's Arsenal. You don't have to be Pep Guardiola's Man City. You don't have to have style and substance and panache, because it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. So how do you dumb the game down? You play direct, you cause havoc, you create as much havoc as possible, and you pick up scraps. You figure out ways to eat. You pick up the pennies, you pick up the dimes while everyone is slashing, 100-pound notes all over the place. Because that's the reality. This is going to be a dogfight at the bottom. And how can you be the meanest dog over the course of 90 minutes? That's what they have to establish. You got to be the team that nobody wants to play. And how do you do that? Tough tackling, mentality, all for one for all. All of that. You just got to lay it out on the field every single game. You have to sacrifice everything you have. And I think that's where the momentum of the fans at the stadium becomes that much more important. There's a fine line in there, because you don't want to get too much into like over the top and riding the emotions and the crest falls and the waves of what the fans give you, because the red mist and making ill-timed challenges and all that come into play. But you want to have that emotion. You want to have that support. You want to have that 12th man, if you will, that you can feed off the energy inside of that stadium and create like these little mini fortresses, because it hasn't looked right. It doesn't feel right. All of these teams are in terrible negative goal differentials. So where do you start? You dumb it down. You make yourself difficult to play against.
And this is why I'm going on a 2.5-week West Ham ban now, because we've got no game this weekend. We're not got a game the following weekend because of international break, and they come back to a game against Southampton at home. And the crowd was terrible in the game against Villa the weekend, and I was in it, and it was just terrible because you can't get behind spineless football, and there was nothing to get behind. And there was a couple of good moments. I mean, Benrahma had 10 shots, and like almost nothing was on target. I think 2 or 3 were on target, and he scored a penalty. But they never looked likely. And there's a bit, there's a bit in these games. I think if 6 minutes went up at Ellen Road, everyone's going to be right behind them.
Yeah.
But there's a belief in the team, whereas there was so little belief. And even the knocking people up in the air thing, like it doesn't, there's nothing. West Ham are so lifeless. And I don't know how you get life from lifelessness. That's a plot point in The Wrath of Khan. We need the Genesis device is what we need. West Ham need the Genesis device. Somehow David Moyes needs to get the Genesis device before the Southampton game. And also, They couldn't play Mikel Antonio in the game because he got injured in a pointless game against the semi-pro team in Cyprus 3 games previously. So, no. Just no. Right, that's almost all we've got time for this week, but I did want to end the show on this. There was a new ball in the Premier League this weekend, and when there's a new ball, and there's always a new ball, we have a feature on the programme where our producer, Tim Horsey, who has, I think we can all agree, a very sensual delivery. He brings us a feature, Dunny, where he describes the ball in a sensual manner, and we call that feature Tim Talks Balls.
The business end of the season is here, and it's time to finish on a high with the introduction of the Nike Flight Third Ball for the rest of the 2022-23 season. The new ball had its first competitive action this past weekend in Match Week 27, where Liverpool absolutely embarrassed themselves against Bournemouth.
So embarrassed by what you did.
Whether it's that decisive goal line clearance, that off the crossbar moment, or that defense-shaming nutmeg, launch your game into a new dimension with the Nike Premier League Flight Third Ball.
Defense-shaming nutmeg. There we go. There we go. That's the new ball. That's the new ball. I think
Tim, that was amazing.
Well
Tim,
done, Tim.
Tim, that was extraordinary. That was your best. That was the best input you've had on this show from day one.
Oh, easily. I felt pretty good about that nutmeg. I will say that.
And on that defense-splitting nutmeg, thanks to Tim Horsey, our producer. Thanks to Brian Dunseth. Always a pleasure, mate.
Same, buddy. Same.
And thanks to me, Tom Rennie, and Harry the Haddock. We'll be back next week with more Week in the Tackle. See you then.
Nutmeg.
Nuts.